Welcome back to another Stalker 2 video, ladies and gentlemen, and in this one I'm going to be talking about something that's on everyone's tongues at the minute. It's a very important topic of conversation, and that is the game's optimization and the fact that it isn't very good. I seem to be saying this more and more with new releases now. It's not very good. The game stutters a lot, tanks FPS, and doesn't run very smoothly. Luckily for us, the developers have already announced that they acknowledge this issue. They are working on quick patches to get out relatively soon, which should fix our issues and make the game a lot more stable in the near future. But until then, what do we do to get the game from running really poorly to a lot more smooth while still keeping the visual fidelity that this game absolutely thrives in? For the most part, it's not to do with your graphics settings in-game. And that may shock some of you. The graphics settings in-game don't actually make a lot of difference. There's a couple of settings that we can turn on that make the game run a hell of a lot smoother in terms of FPS, but unfortunately until the devs fix certain things, you will still get micro stutters and input latency here and there. Up in the top right of the screen you can see FPS counters. The FPS counter on the left is our current FPS, and then you've got the lower FPS on the right, which is our 1% low. That we can keep an eye on throughout this video. But the first thing we're going to do is just open up our options in the Stalker game. We're going to go to the graphics tab. I'd just like to remind you, I'm playing on 1440p resolution. Field of view is completely personal preference, but the main thing we're all here for is the graphics tab, right? At the minute, I am on Epic preset. Everything is set to Epic with nothing else changed. The overall quality preset is Epic. The only thing that is turned off is motion blur, because motion blur is awful. And as you can see, looking around the game, it looks great. It's a little sharp, but it looks good. But our FPS is 45 to 50. And our 1% low is hovering around the high 20s and early 30s. That's not a very smooth experience at all. What we're going to do now is change our graphics setting, overall quality preset to low, and save the changes. It'll say that certain changes won't take effect until you've restarted. That won't mean any of these. It'll just say that. And as you can see, the FPS in the pause menu has gone up quite a bit, but once everything generates in again, we drop all the way down to under 60. The game looks noticeably worse. Everything's got like a distance fog around it. And our 1% low is still hovering mid 30s. Sometimes might peak 40 depending on how we're looking. But if you look at certain edges when you're turning in, pop-in happens a lot more. And you still get those micro stutters, as you see as I turn when things are loading in. Nothing changes too much when you're changing your graphics presets low. What does change though is if we turn on DLSS and, more importantly, FSR Frame Generation. I'm going to change our overall quality preset back to Epic here. And I'm only going to turn on FSR Frame Generation. I'm not even going to turn on our upscaling to DLSS just yet. And remember, on Epic, we were getting, 35 FPS? This is now Epic with frame generation turned on. And we're at 85. The game looks good, sharp, and we're running at double the FPS just by changing that one setting. And when we move around, sure, you still get those stutters, which unfortunately we can't change until developers put out a hotfix, but it is a lot more smooth as a whole just by turning on that one setting. Now you can go even further than this and go into your graphics settings and turn on an upscaling. Now there are different methods for upscaling. The main one I'm going to be talking about is DLSS, and I'm going to keep it on the quality preset But if you want to go a step further, you can change it to DLAA, which is basically no change. It's 100% resolution scale, but it's just on to smooth out that overly sharp edges. That's up to you to decide whether you think the game looks better or worse. Noticeably in the foreground, I think it looks slightly better because it's not overly sharp, but in the distance you see the trees are a bit hazy and ghosty. So I am an R about that setting, personally. I don't know whether to keep it on or off, but you can turn down your sharpness, and if you don't like how sharp the game looks, and turn upscaling off, if you will, and the game is still sharp, but nowhere near as sharp as it was. So yeah, graphics settings in this game is weird. It's not so much what you pick anywhere else. Obviously, you're changing your texture resolution or your overall quality to medium, for example, and then turning on FSR Frame Generation might get you a couple more FPS than what I get by having everything set to epic. But my point in this video is it's not really noticeable, as opposed to having everything set to low and having this turned off. You're actually better off having everything set higher, having a better visual experience, and turning this on. I will be making a separate video once hotfixes have been released for this game and the settings, but for now, turn on FSR Frame Generation. It will help you have a smoother experience. You will still get those micro stutters occasionally, but it is being looked at by the devs. As a workaround solution, FSR Frame Generation is your best bet. You don't need to turn graphic settings low or anything like that. Just go ahead with the frame generation.